Hey, good Tuesday evening, everyone. State Representative Brad Halbrook here with another Tuesday night edition of our Legislative Roundtable in Town Hall to kind of discuss what happened last week, third reading deadline week. And again, we're always in the constant pursuit of truth, logic, and common sense. And with that, let's just go kind of an opening welcome round here with Representative Chris Miller and then Representative Dan Calkins and then our State Director of the Illinois Freedom Caucus, Colin Mosley. Welcome there, Chairman Leader Chris Miller.
Well, it's good to see everybody this evening and welcome back. It seems like we've been on sabbatical for a little time, but we're trying to compile all the bad information we could possibly compile to share it with you so you could feel our pain. We're going to just take a snapshot look at how the sausage is made there at the Capitol, the Bad Idea Factory, and so we're going to let her roll this evening.
Exactly. And Dan, some people say it'd be it's probably like beating your head against a brick wall up there in Springfield. I say beating your head against a brick wall might be less painful than the stuff that we have to endure in the Puzzle Palace. Dan, welcome.
Oh, great to be here this evening. At least if you're beating your head against the brick wall, the only person you're hurting is yourself. So, oh man. Well, we did have a couple of good things happen last week. We had the March for Life. Had the folks in there that rallied for, they had the pro-life folks were there. And then the Second Amendment people, ISRA had their iGold as well. So there were a couple of really highlights, good people visiting the Capitol, coming around and talking to us. So it wasn't completely a loss. But man, some of the bills that went through, and I know we're going to talk about some of them today, or this evening, but I just don't know where this stuff comes from. I can't imagine who is dreaming some of this stuff up. So we'll get into it in a second. It's great to be here tonight.
Yeah, and Director Colin, you're not down on the House floor, but you are a more than a casual observer. You're plugged into what's going on. And what's your observation of third reading deadline last week?
My observation is that I don't know who Chris Welch's scheduler is, but they need to be fired. We spend a lot of time in Springfield in February and March. Yeah, sure, we're in committee hearings, but we are wasting precious time on the floor. And then we approach deadline week, and I think it was Thursday night. We were in session for 12 hours at least till 10 o'clock in the evening. And I see that getting worse, of course, as May arrives. But we got a lot of stuff done last week, but maybe of the 400 bills we passed, 25 of them were good for Illinois, and the other 375 were bad or do nothing or the like. So just a frustrating week, a long week, but better days are certainly ahead.
Right. Well, and like we always say, right, frequent listeners or viewers of our programming here will hear us talk about how all the good bills come out at late at night, holiday weekends, Saturday, whatever it is. And true to form, about 10 o'clock Thursday night, the big healthcare bill came out, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of spending. And it doesn't come out till 9 o'clock at night on Thursday night. But anyhow.
when the governor, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say, I just wanted to remind you that we need to pass this today, and then we're going to have several amendments to make it a good bill, and then we'll bring it back. So just trust us.
Yeah, I believe it's our good colleague, Marty McLaughlin, that has a sign on his door that says, "We know it's crap, we'll fix it in the Senate." And that's pretty much right. And of course, if you ever see the governor or the AG walk on the House floor after 8 o'clock at night, nothing good is about to happen.
Right.
100%.
Good summary. Hey guys, let's get right into our slide sets. Opening slide here, just kind of who we are and what we're about here today. And so with that, let's get to this. Deadline week. It was the last day for House bills to be voted on before moving to the Senate. But guess what? The Democrats always find ways to extend their deadlines. Have you guys seen that before? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you always know something bad's going to happen when they announce a bill and then the sponsor wants to, waive the rules. Why have rules? I mean, I've said it, I've got how many times in the last 6 years that rules, we don't need no stinking rules. Just do whatever the heck you want to do. I mean, don't offend us by passing rules and then coming to the House floor and, well, we want to waive the posting rule or we want to waive the whatever, you know. It did get a little ugly when Representative DeLuca railed against the Democrats because what they do is they as soon as they file a bill, they file all of these requests for fiscal impacts and all that, you know, these impact statements that we're supposed to be able to get to know the impact of that bill on our budget. And Representative DeLuca wanted to know what the fiscal impact was of a bill that one of his colleagues was running, and somebody else had filed for the note, and then stood up and asked for that to be dismissed because they didn't want anybody to know what is the fiscal impact. And Anthony he was really, really unhappy with that silly game, you know, that the Democrats play so that they don't have to tell us or the public, the folks that are going to be impacted by this legislation, what is the cost? What really is going to be the cost? So I don't know how we fix that. The Democrats are going to have to fix it, obviously, because they control the vote on this stuff. But that's really frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we started the week with just over 500 bills on the calendar, either on second or third reading. Of course, third reading is when they get called to vote on, but there's a lot of bills that are on second, but once they've been on the calendar for at least one day, the next day they can add amendments and move them right to third and vote on them right then and there. But in the final analysis, we left 350 bills that got voted on, still 50 to 100 plus or minus that have been left uncalled. So it'll be interesting to see what the life of some of those bills are, whether they'll get called or just die on the vine or come up in an amendment in a shell bill potentially late here in May. That's always the dangerous part is language pops up in an amendment late one night.
Yeah, we know from years past that some of those bills that are substantive might just be left to stand alone on their own. But some of these bills on the calendar are what they're going to use as they call them vehicle bills, gut and replace bills, vehicle bills for, we saw them take a bill and gut and replace and use it as a vehicle for the budget implementation bill last year because they forgot to do that. I'm pretty sure that it was the bill that we just passed last week to officially make, was it the soybean, the state bean of Illinois? That's the bill they stole last year for the budget implementation because they forgot to pass a BEMP vehicle. We've seen them gut and replace insurance bills for firearms regulation. So those 50 to 100 bills on the calendar are not necessarily just innocuous or things that you want to ignore because they may pop up on adjournment week as something crazy. So that's the danger. Nothing is ever. This is why Dan has to retire. Nothing ever dies in Springfield, per what Joe says, right?
That's what Joe says.
Well, and some of my favorite bills is there is a new program or expanding a program, and it's subject to appropriation. And of course, back to earlier conversation, what's the cost? Well, we don't know what the cost is, or we haven't figured that out yet. Well, that's why we put these fiscal notes on to figure out what the cost is before we vote on it. Well, where's the money going to come from? Is it going to come from general revenue or other state funds? Well, that's what we're all going to figure out, right? And so those are always kind of the fun ones, is subject to appropriation. That's just a blank check. And that's dangerous.
And Representative Crespo, another moderate Democrat, I think he stood up several times last week when these subject to appropriation bills came forward and was very critical of his fellow member who was presenting the bill for not for putting something out there that there's going to be a line item in a budget for now, and somebody's got to figure out how to pay for it if they want to pay for it, where that money's coming from, like you said, Brad. And Fred was he was very harsh on some of those sponsors where the bill was subject to appropriation, because nobody knows.
Right.
And I think it's another one of those games that they're playing, and perhaps there's going to be enough Democrats that are tired of playing those games.
Well, but to that point, Representative Crespo's got his own share of problems, because he was before our Appropriations Committee the other night asking for, get this, $188 million to fund newcomers' education. And so with no idea where that money was going to come from, and going to fund newcomers to the tune of over $14,000 per student. And that was just in Cook and DuPage and parts of Lake County. So, yeah, I appreciate him getting up and asking those questions on the House floor, but yet he will go before the Appropriations Committee, and he's not ashamed to ask for $188 million worth of new money for a new program. So, yeah, but anyhow, hey, let's move on. What's that, Chris?
I said, we all know that the unusual is the usual, and just like Cresco, he probably stood up there and railed on that bill and then voted for it anyway, would be my guess.
That's probably a good, yeah. So next week we go back to Springfield. We're off for a few days doing district work and the like. We'll start seeing Senate bills come over. Of course, our House bills are headed over to the Senate. They call that kind of reset. These bills move around. They go through the similar process, get assigned to committee, voted out, and amendments are made or not. And yeah, so gentlemen, I'm just going to throw it open. You guys feel free to weigh in on this subject, however.
Well, this is when you're going to start seeing bills. When the phrase is, fix it in the Senate. I don't know if the Senate says fix it in the House, but you're going to start seeing amendments come up in committee to language that the sponsors have promised one chamber or another would be adopted. So, they're going to go through this committee process, and the deadline week for committees and deadline weeks for Senate bills. And you're going to see chambers amending these things and then sending them back again on concurrence. So, if a bill has gone through the House and goes to the Senate and it gets changed, the House has to then vote on the bill again on what's called final action concurrence. If a bill is not amended, the vote in the Senate's final. But if it is amended, then it comes back to concurrence. And the concurrence vote is, again, where you're going to have to be vigilant on, okay, what did they change? Did they gut and replace? Did they amend? The concurrence vote last year is when the Freedom Caucus discovered that whole non-citizen police thing. That's why we voted no on concurrence. So that's when you can see the games really start being played, especially when a bill's voted on at 10 o'clock at night and the Senate comes to us at 8 a.m. on the next day on concurrence.
Right. And we need to explain what that concurrence means. Is that the bill has passed the House, it went to the Senate, it's been amended in the Senate, passed the Senate, has to come back to the House, but it doesn't go to a committee. Right. We don't get to hear that bill in a committee. It goes right to the House floor, where you get to have an up and down vote on the Senate version of that bill. So that's where the games get played. So we'll send an insurance bill to the Senate. They'll gut it and replace it with an anti-Second Amendment bill and vote it out of the Senate. It comes back to the House, and it's substantially different. I mean, it has nothing to do with the House bill that we passed out of committee, that we passed on the floor. But it doesn't go back to the committee. It just goes right to the House floor, where 60 Democrats can vote for it, and it goes to the governor's office without any public notice. With no committee debate, no witnesses. It's a very flawed process.
Well, and that's, lots of dangers there. It may have been a good bill when it left the House, and it probably had Republican sponsors on it and may have had a lot of Republican votes on it. But we don't get that committee vote when it comes back to kind of start to weed out what happened in the Senate, Dan, to your point. I mean, we don't get that committee hearing, and that is a dangerous, flawed process. Gentlemen, let's bring up our last slide. This is kind of recent news. You can see here the headlines, the bullet points. Tragic killing of Chicago police officer. Anybody want to comment on that real quick before we go into these other couple of points?
Well, I can tell the story. So you have an officer who had just gotten off duty, was still wearing his uniform, got in his personal vehicle to drive home, and gets basically ambushed. I believe the report said there was somewhere between 25 and 30 shots that were fired. Unsure if the officer even fired his own weapon. And Chicago has gunshot detectors on, like, I think street lights and electrical poles. They alerted the PD, and they find the officer laying in the street, missing his weapon, badge, and vehicle. Now, what's even more, just what paints the picture for this is this officer not long ago appeared in a tribute video giving a testimonial about one of his colleagues who was killed that he was in the academy with. And now this guy himself has been murdered. And this is Brandon Johnson's Chicago. And the mayor has been very, the mayor would be quicker to defend, support, and respond if there was a Black Lives Matter activist killed in the streets than he is if there's a CPD officer killed. This is the Chicago we live with right now. And this is the state of affairs for all law enforcement in Illinois. We see the officer that was killed in the line of duty from DeKalb. Her killer was let out on pretrial release. They haven't even caught the guys that killed this officer yet. So yeah, that's sort of the situation around this.
Yeah. So let's go back on to this next bullet point. Dan, you spoke about the Rivian stuff. This was in the northern end of your district, and then we'll come back and kind of cap Brandon Johnson's first year. The electrical vehicle plants, Rivian more specifically, Dan. Explain that a little bit further for us.
Well, Rivian makes electric vehicles. One of their big contracts is with Amazon for delivery trucks, all electric delivery trucks. Inventory is piling up at their plant, and they've moved a lot of their inventory off-site to the State Farm campus for storage. I mean, they've been building vehicles and not selling them for several months. They had a pretty substantial layoff earlier this year, about 10% of their workforce. They've been closed for the last 3 weeks for a shutdown cleanup. Been working inside the plant, but they've not run the production line. And before they could call everybody back to work, they announced another layoff of employees. The electric vehicle market is imploding. Ford, took a huge hit on Rivian. I mean, billions of dollars that they bought Rivian stock. Ford's production line for EVs is down to one shift a day, I think. General Motors is backing off on their EVs. The Japanese car makers are very, very cautious about getting into the EV market because consumers don't want them. Consumers, they do not want these electric vehicles. And I kind of try to remind people, back in my day, there was Ford made an Edsel. It was Edsel Ford, one of the sons of the Ford family, and he had a design of this car and he wanted it produced. And by golly, they produced it and nobody bought it. And that's what's going on now. Well, to tie that together, we have to have batteries to make these EVs work. So here's in Manteno, as we were all up there, the Chinese company Goshen has convinced Governor Pritzker to give him $125 million to open up a Chinese EV battery plant in Goshen. So people up there are upset about that, first of all. And secondly, if they're going to be building something that nobody really wants. But what we're finding is that there's the company rented a house and there's like, I think 15 Chinese nationals. Now these folks came to the United States to work on this battery plant for Goshen. So these are Chinese communist workers who are trying to get this battery plant going. None of them belong to the union. There's no UAW people. There's no union workers. There's no equity, whatever it is, DEI going on there. We were sold this plan, this promise that if we CJ, if we bring all these green jobs to the front, we're going to employ minorities, and they're the only minority working at the Goshen plant in Manteno are Chinese communists. There's no black people, there's no Hispanic people. And when I talked about that on the House floor, I looked over at our colleagues, and they didn't seem to care. They didn't seem to care.
No,
But everything that comes to the House floor, everything that we hear in committee, well, how many minorities do you employ, or what are we doing to and for my neighborhood and all this and that, and I just go, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a big lie of our time, that they've sold this bill of good that black and brown people are going to be employed at these places, and that these are going to be good union jobs. And I mean, it's a complete joke. I know that we've had several thousand-acre solar farm down here in the Ashmore area, and I know one of the local farmers called the IBEW and asked them why they weren't over there protesting, because there was absolutely no union hirees working on that project. And we're seeing that all over the state of Illinois, where all these jobs have been promised and there's absolutely no delivery at all. And I know that, and another thing too, if you go back and watch the tape, we all predicted all this stuff, that the only people that was going to be hired at Goshen was going to be Chinese communists, because that's just the way they do things, and it's a complete lie. Plus, all these EV manufacturers and battery plants are going to be bankrupt in the next 5 years. And even with all of the millions of dollars as governmental subsidies, they're still going to go broke, because nobody wants the crap.
Yeah. Well, and we also gave this huge subsidy to Stellantis or whatever up in Belleville to reopen that Chrysler, to reopen their Chrysler plant. And one of the big deals up there is, guess what? They're putting a battery plant in up there, up in Belleville.
Right.
So how many battery plants do you need? And
we don't need any of them.
No.
I wonder how many EVs that Governor Pritzker has in his personal fleet.
Well, the fleet question is really interesting, because Brad could get into this, but we were working on trying to prod that, because the state has this mandate now to have the state fleet be EV by 2030, and I know that's something that Leader Halbrook has taken the reins on, investigating with the state.
Well, yeah, and to that point, we found out that CMS, Central Management Services, controls the state fleet, which is 12,000 vehicles. I've asked them specifically in the hearing the other night, and then in a written communication, to provide me with every class of vehicle, which ones apply to the EV mandate, because this has got to be 100% EV by 2031. So we've got six and a half years to convert something like 12,000 vehicles. And we're trying to get a handle on that. We did find out in a follow-up hearing with the Secretary of State, they have a fleet of vehicles. And I asked him specifically, Secretary of State Janulius, I said, is your fleet a part of CMS? No. Are they subject to the EV mandate that was passed last year? He'll get back to me. So we're waiting on those answers. Yeah. So this, as we peel the layers of this onion back, and well, let me just put the bullet point, or maybe the finishing touch back on the 12,000 vehicles. So 12,000 vehicles that CMS has control of. A lot of them, a high percentage of them, come under the EV mandate, 6.5 years to get them converted. 100 vehicles is all that's in their fleet today. 100 EVs is all that's in their fleet today. So
they have no way to charge them. Right. I mean, there's no chargers at Stratton. There's no chargers in the parking lots where we park our cars, where all the House and now the Senate, where we're parking. There isn't an EV charger.
Right. There will be, I'm sure.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I think that's a question that we need to ask the architect. But here's Brad. So the next time you talk to him, ask him if the governor's plane is going to be electric.
Hey, Will Davis, Representative
I
Will
know.
Davis, Democrat, he said on the record that he on part of an airport hearing, he said, I don't know, maybe airplanes will be electric in the next few years. I'm like, are you kidding? I mean, first of all, how are you gonna? I mean, the weight alone would be almost impossible to fly. Yeah, crazy.
Well, it's like a recent meme I've seen. You know, memes work, and it talks about wind and solar panels don't run on wind and solar; they run on subsidies.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Hey, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's true.
They do. They run on subsidies, and that's a conversation for another day. Hey, guys,
Right.
let's kind of we was going to kind of maybe wrap up here with Mayor Brandon Johnson's first year. Is there been any highlights or lowlights? Let's just spend real quick a few seconds on Mayor Johnson's almost
I
first
think
year.
that you can sum it up with one word. It's been a disaster.
Yeah, absolute failure in every area. I mean, infrastructure is failing. Public safety is failing. The only person thriving in Brandon Johnson's Chicago is an illegal immigrant. That's it. Everybody else is destitute. Quality of life is lower. You could paint the streets with blood. I mean, it's a failure.
You get what you vote for.
You get what you vote for. All right.
And
go ahead.
And then the education thing. I mean, we had that huge brouhaha on the House floor over this elected school board for Chicago public schools. And when we were going through that debate, it was, do we want to elect all of them the first year, or do we do a hybrid where they elected 10 the first year, 11 the second year? Well, the school board is appointed by the mayor. The mayor controls the school board currently. And all of that debate last year about, do we elect a hybrid board? Do we elect the whole board? The teachers union wanted to have a hybrid because they didn't feel like they had enough money to fund 21 candidates. They were not going to be able to control who got on the school board. So let's break it up into two different elections. Well, all of a sudden
they have the mayor. They have the mayor. You know,
the mayor appoints their members to the school board or to their friends, but for some reason they didn't care for how it went. Well, now all of a sudden the locally elected school board is waiting for that to happen is a threat to their schools. So they were arguing and calling each other names, during that debate on the House floor about the bill that froze now the state of Illinois is telling the Chicago school board, the school district, the mayor, that they cannot close any schools for 2 years until after the whole school board has been elected, because these legislators, and I don't know who, fears that Brandon Johnson and the appointed school board is going to start cutting funds and closing these non-performing schools in their neighborhood. And they don't have an elected member in their neighborhood to fight back. And it was hilarious because they set themselves up for this. They allowed themselves to be put in this position, and now they're trying to legislatively fix it. And I guess the General Assembly, the state, we can tell the school district that you can't close the school. I'm not sure constitutionally how that works, but
yeah, I don't know.
It was huge, and it was comical to watch them call each other names and racist and argue about it. And they're a mess. The city is a mess. The elected members are at each other on the other side of the aisle. And I think the people in Chicago, the voters, the people that actually live in the neighborhoods, have had enough. I think they're starting to find out and figure out the fact that the people they're electing don't represent them anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Dan, I'll take that as your closing comment. Let's go to Colin and Colin. Any closing thoughts, and then Chris, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hey, all I've got is, as we said earlier, we are in for a wild ride in May in the General Assembly. And so we covet your support, your prayers, sharing our content, filling out witness slips, anything that you can do to partner with us in the fight for freedom, because May, I would consider May the trenches. So we would appreciate your support.
Right. And Colin, I put the slide back up. Talk about the Substack real quick so they can see that, and kind of a new
Yes.
email way there, Substack.
Yep. So Substack is sort of our column, our newsletter, whatever you want to call it. This is where we message and share with you guys the conservative take on the happenings of your Illinois state capitol. So we would appreciate you reading that, sharing it. That's where you can sort of get a quick download of what's going on.
Right. Exactly. Chairman Leader Chris, your closing thoughts.
Well, thank you for joining the Illinois Freedom Caucus this evening, and I hope you found your time to be valuable because we value your time. And this is the home of truth, logic, and common sense. And so what you hear here on this program and broadcast is the unfiltered truth. And so please join us next time, and thanks again. Have a great rest of your evening.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thanks for being here this evening. You know, one thing that I noticed that was overwhelmingly, we did not see any property tax relief this last few weeks. We've not seen any income tax relief. We've not seen any mandate relief to anybody. We've not seen any regulatory relief, but more spending. I'm sure there's going to be more borrowing in there, and there's probably going to be more taxing in there one way or the other. So hopefully that gets all rectified in 4 weeks as we come back next Tuesday. And then I want to make a special mention too that a week from this Thursday on May 2nd is our Illinois prayer breakfast that will be in Springfield. Look on our social media sites for information there. It's open to the public, but RSVPs are required. So we'll put that up. You can go to my Facebook site now and see that there with a little bit more information. And again, as always, we covet that you will like and share and follow and subscribe to our content to help us overcome the algorithmic overlords and big tech overlords. And with that, gentlemen, I'm going to close out. Have a good evening.